All right, we now have the entire setup going. We've now gone over pretty much everything that you need to know in order to start taking photos. And the thing is, everything that I've gone over so far are things that I feel like you would eventually know because there's a standard to it, right? So cameras, lenses, lights, there's always some kind of rule and just overall standard that you learn for physical items like that. But for composition, there is no set standard. There's no right way, there's no wrong way to composition because ultimately photography is still an art form and it's subjective. And on top of that, there aren't many guides on composition. Narrowed down to board games, currently, there are 0 guides on how to properly compose board game photos. So in today's episode, I'm gonna show you things that I've never discussed before. This is the episode where you make your photos stand out, and I'm gonna show you ways to compose your board game pieces so that way your overall photos are going to pop, so they are interesting to see and unique to look at, and hopefully so they also help you take one step further towards booking clients. On top of that, tomorrow I'm gonna be announcing the very first ever, I think, YouTube board game photo contest. So pay attention closely to these last set of tips going into the photo contest. Welcome to episode 3, composition. Let's get it. Okay, hi. So we're gonna break this down by component. Feel free to pause the video whenever you want. That way you have a reference to when you're taking your own photos. But let's go ahead and start off with the box. So you've already seen these, but this one is really easy. You have 2 kinds of shots, right? You have the flat shot because many retailers will look for something simple, just like this. It's a photo that you very often need. Take it because you probably will need it, move on, and done. Secondly, now it gets way more fun by doing something as simple as this. That's it. Look at the massive difference from just angling the box slightly, just like that. Now you add depth to the box, so it looks way more 3D versus flat. You're revealing more of the box art on the side, and I oftentimes angle the camera downward, so I'm not really shooting it straight like this. I'm actually taking my camera and pointing it down so that we can kind of see the top of the box. And now you also add in that dramatic shadow that I always talk about. This is going to be your bread and butter shots. You're welcome. Now, one subtle movement just took your photo from a standard Amazon listing to a clean, professional, engaging photo. Now, when you start constructing your portfolio, you will need a shot like this. And by the way, I just thought of this, but don't feel like when you're putting all this together that you're copying me. Look, like I've said from day one, we are in this together. I don't care about that stuff, or else I wouldn't be teaching you step by step on how to do all these things. If I can help you get better, if I can help you book clients, that's all I care about. Okay, so do not feel pressured about that at all. Now, number 2, player boards. Practically every photo that you see, a player board will be laid flat on the table. And nothing wrong with that because that's how we play our games naturally. But there are 2 things you can do in order to spice this up for photos. So 1, if you're focusing on just the board, lift it up. If it has a fold, bend it a little so people know that it does have a fold. And that fold also creates a shadow just like the box. If you want to lay it flat on the table, you want to dress it up, and here's what I mean by that. These are some pointers to keep in mind. You want to use an immersive angle. So for wingspan, it feels like you're really sitting in front of the board. And then you want to start filling up your negative space. So rather than just putting the board in the middle, I put this one right onto the bottom border of the camera, and then I started filling in the rim of the board in order to fill in all of that empty space. Now notice how I use all the rectangular sharp edge items and matched it with the main board. That's how you accent the subject, by adding items that share similar characteristics to it. In this case, they were cards, trays, cubes, and achievement boards. And lastly, sometimes I like to add in things that break symmetry. 2 reasons why. 1, it gives people a chance to stop when they're looking at your photo, because if it's a complete symmetrical line like this, you don't really know what side to start from. But because I added in a fan of cards, now your eyes kind of scan up, curve a little bit, and then follow through, or vice versa. Now, obviously, when you're staring at a photo, you're probably taking all this information so fast, so who knows if that actually happens. But at least you are giving viewers an opportunity to help guide them by introducing leading lines. So overall, I added in a fan of cards in order to help break that symmetry. Now, number 3, tokens and resources. These will test the amount of patience that you have. If you ever want to increase your photography stamina and your overall patience, tokens will do so. For instance, here are all the egg cubes and resources in Wingspan. Notice how I generally have every token facing in one direction. In product photography, If you have a messy looking composition, it will stick out like a sore thumb. For example, I could have just taken, a set of tokens and just put it in a pile, call it a day. If you get lazy in your photos, it's gonna show. And for me, especially coming from a professional standpoint, you always wanna go the extra mile because let's say if I was a publisher, I wanna see my games presented in the best way possible. If you are lazy and you kind of just throw these things all in one tray or just in a pile, that's sloppy. And if it's one thing my mentor used to tell me that has stuck with me for life is don't get sloppy. So we're gonna take the extra mile and organize all of our tokens properly. You wanna put them in the same direction. You wanna try to help condense the cubes as best we can, and also align the rows neatly. For composing photos, typically when things are shown flat, it's boring. So instead of just putting eggs in a straight line, I made it like this. Now, once I did that for the eggs, it sets the stage for how the rest of the resources were also going to be shaped. So I started out with the eggs like an arrow, and then I just added in everything else to match. So if you are ever stuck, if you hit a roadblock, if you have no idea on how to compose your photo, always think about how you can try to avoid making it flat. For example, for that egg picture, I have no idea how it's gonna compose it, right? But because I started in with the eggs and doing that whole arrow-like composition, everything else falls into line. And again, sometimes I do like to slightly break symmetry, so in this case, it was with the red cubes at the bottom, shifting it slightly so it kind of blends in the two sides of the frame. If you had a straight line, viewers will kind of just look at the left and then at the right, but with a slanted line, now you kind of gradually scan over both sides. So when you compose your photos, you're always thinking about how you are guiding people to engage with your picture. Even if it's product photography, we are still telling a story. Number 4 are cards and pretty much any other type of player board. So here are some factions from Tapestry. Look at how much more interesting this photo is. Again, take the time to go the extra mile and your compositions will turn out way more unique. They will stand out and people will notice. Again, I don't have a guide for taking board game photos, so this is always new for me too. But because I'm always thinking about these principles in mind and asking myself, okay, how can I make this unique? That's what's guiding me towards finding new and unique compositions for things that you don't see. Each of these player boards were held up using Santorini pieces that I mentioned in the last video, along with whatever else I had laying around. And then I ended up curving the boards to get that dramatic shadow and boom. Again, all these photos are using the same exact lighting setup that I mentioned in the previous episodes. So key light, rim light, and fill light. Yeah, those three. Now here's another example where I hung a wire to suspend the boards from Tapestry's expansion above the other boards. Cards, I love to fan them, and if they are a set of cards or a deck of cards, I like to show the back as well. Here I put cards from Tapestry in 3 different ways. I put them flat on the table, I put 2 in the front and 2 in the back as the center cards, and then a fan of them up top. I actually tape these cards together to help hold them just like this, and then I use wire to suspend them so they stand vertically. And one last thing for cards, I also like to duplicate a line of them like this for Bloodstone so they create a V shape, and overall just show them in multiple ways like I did with Tapestry previously, like on the table, vertically and fanning them. So 3 different ways to show one set of cards. Number 5 are dice. Now dice are probably the ones that are the most difficult to work with. Why? Because, well, you roll dice, right? So suspending them is usually a great option for showcasing them because your other options are pretty limited since they are so small. You don't really have a way to kind of just lift them forward like you can with cards. So I always like to suspend dice. That's kind of my go-to for dice in general. You kind of just tape wire to the dice and then manipulate them with the wire so you get some nice light on it that gives a nice dramatic shadow while showing as many faces of the die as possible. Like here is the one from Red Rising. So do you see how big of an effect it is to learn lighting from the previous episodes? The way we light our subjects just really makes our photos pop. Now notice how I also overlap dice when they are in multiples, so they are also grouped together as if I just rolled them off your hands. I always like to keep photos immersive, so it helps kind of simulate that player experience. And then add in that punchy lighting I just talked about. Yes. Now, number 6, the easiest one, actually, because they already look good on their own, and those are miniatures and other unique items. Like for instance, this tray of helium tokens from Red Rising. Now, these already look amazing by itself, so how can we help it a little bit? Well, we want a shadow to form from this. So what I did was raise the tray, and then keep the items connected so you know that this is the lid for the tray. And it's also better symmetry here because the tray itself is a fox, the lid is a fox, and the shadow being casted is still shaped like a fox, versus if you put it flat on the table, it would have just been a flat line for a shadow. Now minis, like I said, do look fine on their own for product photography, but I like to add in items associated with minis, like with this boss monster from Bloodstone. I put the fire panel here, and I put the fire blast tokens and the boss card itself to help accent the mini. So in this case, how I thought about the composition was I started off with the mini first. So the miniature was added in straight in the middle of the frame. And then I added in the giant fire panels to help fill up all that space above. Malvara, which is the boss's name. Malvara's dice was right next to it. And then a card to vertically stage the left side. And then I added in duplicates of the card backs right beneath it. The fire blast tokens on the bottom, and lastly fireball tokens to help tie in everything together. Now that leads us to the final, most difficult type of composition. And this is by far the most difficult one to master because this is the hero shot. This is the shot with all the components in frame. Do not feel bad if you can't get this one right because it's very difficult, but we are gonna tie in everything that I taught you today. So the ultimate rule of thumb here, right, is to not get sloppy. Don't get sloppy, don't get lazy. Remember, our job is to make the game look as good as possible. So let's start with the main board right in the center, just like how setup would be. And then I put the hero, aka the box, right in the center. It's okay to cover up a little bit of the main box since conceptually, if the game already has an expansion, then it's more likely that people are familiar with the base game already. So covering a little bit of the base game, that's okay. Now the sides are gonna fill up with bigger pieces that cover space vertically, like with player boards and with faction boards, maps, anything that looks like this. On the left, I have civilizations from the expansion and civilizations on the right side also, but these are from the base game. I then like to fill in the rest of the frame with all the small components like all the building miniatures from the base game to the side over here, and all the new expansion buildings right front and center. I also put exploration tiles to fill up the corner over here and expansion cards on the bottom right corner. In the very front, I have what would seem like the player experience, so your player board with all the buildings set up, a civilization board, a map tile, and a set of colored houses that you would start with. And finally, a point of interest to finish it up, and those would be the civilization tiles which are floating on the left side and cards planning out to fill up the right negative space. So here's the overall idea behind total board game components. You want to start off with the main board in the center. Behind that, you can put your box, which is going to be the hero of the shot. And then you want to organize and fill in all that negative space around the board. So player boards, dice, resource tokens, cards, all that can be used on the side. Just make sure that they are organized and again, not just thrown in there like a pile. Now to really nail this in, let's go ahead and show one more example. So here's Red Rising. This time there isn't really a player experience setup because it's a card game. However, you still have the main board in the center. The hero is right behind it. Cards, or in this case house tiles, are on the left and the right. I have resource cubes matching each color and organized in a rectangle to help fill in that negative space on the left and right. Now notice here how I don't keep things linear because again, that's boring, so I spread them out so you can see glimpses of the other houses, and it also acts as leading lines going towards the box. I have player aids in the front and center. Main board is fully set up with fleet tokens spanning the fleet track, so you see lots of color displayed. And this overall would be an example of symmetry, organization, and overall colors just really pop here in the neutral gray background. And that is composition. So it's hard. It's not something that you're gonna get on your very first try. Yes, there is no right and wrong way of doing things, but there are still ways of making your photos more satisfying to see and more professional to sell. Now guess what? We still haven't even taken a photo yet, 4 episodes in if you count 0 being one of them. But on the next one, we will finally be snapping shots and dialing in our camera settings. So until then, I will see you all in episode 4 and look out for the photo contest tomorrow. See you then.